This is Dyslexic Design Thinking. For the past 25 years, Gil Gershoni has been the head of his own branding agency, Gershoni Creative. And one of the things he's passionate about rebranding is his dyslexia. In this series, Gil sits down with members of the dyslexic community for eye-opening conversations about the intersection of dyslexia and creativity, and what dyslexia can teach us about ourselves and the world around us. Today, Gil talks to Theresa Fitzgerald, a mission-driven design leader, educator, and designer. Theresa is the former vice president of brand creative for Sesame Workshop and a former design executive at Nickelodeon and United Media. She is also a lecturer at the Parsons School of Design in New York and a reading tutor at the Children's Dyslexia Center. Enjoy.
From one creative director to another, welcome. It's so great to have you here today, Theresa.
Hello, thank you.
I was so excited to sort of sit down and have a conversation with you to hear about the way you create. So I thought maybe one of the first questions I should say is, what is the first memory of you creating something?
Oh gosh. So I grew up in a big and creative family, and art and projects were a part of our life. So we used to have this box in the basement. It was a craft room, and we would save like onion bags, and there'd be all kinds of art supplies and leftover magazines and scraps. And we would always be making projects. And for our birthday party, we would have like a hat decorating contest where we just like fold the cone and that paper into a cone and decorate it. And it would just be like no one else's party.
I love it. I love it. Definitely something that we need to try. I love when you make things that are so sort of, you can find them anywhere, but when you make them, there's a whole other level of meaning and attention to detail and family and community. That's beautiful. Tell me, what is a creative director?
So it goes beyond just the art director or design. It's really sculpting and imagining, responding to some problem and shaping all the creative experiences around that. So how it sounds, how it feels, how it looks, how it's written, every detail of the visual and the music. All the things that really go into capturing your audience's hearts and minds. And really, creative director really should understand how we want people to feel. Do we want to excite them or we want to call them to action? So it's really curating all those creative choices to that outcome.
What's some of the qualities you think that makes a good creative director?
So I like to say that it's really a combination of the head and the heart. So you need to be able to listen and ask good questions and really pull out what the thing is you're trying to solve, what the information is, and being analytical and dig and research. And then the heart is aligning kind of the talent and the choices to what's going to capture the emotion. And it's really that combination, I think, that makes really good creative directors that can go back and forth between, they're really connected to their emotions, but they're not neglecting all the information that's needed.
It's not easy. As dyslexics, I think it's naturally that I jump between the two parts of my brain, and I can actually look at the analytics and I can see and feel the emotions. And I can do the other way. I can see the emotion and I know how to sort of reconstruct it, to create just that perfect sensory experience that evokes that desired outcome as you described it. Do you find as a creative director that you do more art? Do you make more? Or do you find that it's more of a directing and guiding a team?
For many, many years, I clung on to making. I loved making. I loved being the one, just like, give me the problems. I'm going to go. I was kind of like, I need to go away and make it. Like, I need to just like play. Loved. And I don't say that like only past tense, but for the last many years, I've been more using design to create the team, inspire collaboration, align with the business, when possible,
Hmm.
really understand the designer's temperament and talent to align that with what we were delivering so that I feel like you can always tell when people are engaged and passionate about what they're doing or they're just doing the work.
Right.
And I do feel like the best work happens when, people are fully engaged.
Hmm. Do you miss the making part, or do you find it somewhere in other ways?
You know what? I started on my own. I
Hmm.
started sewing. I started making quilts. And I do design on the side, but not to the scale that I used to. But
Hmm.
I what I love about sewing is it's the tactile. It's
Hmm.
slow. It is slow
Hmm.
by nature. It is slow, and I love bringing a contemporary design approach to an old craft.
I wanted to go around talking a little bit around, so much of your work over the years has been focused around children and student and working with young folks. What is about the audience that really attracts you?
So when I was little, as you know, struggling reader,
Hmm.
and I really fell in love with the images on the page, and I go back to, I loved Richard Scarry books. And there were such great characters, and the way they captured stories was like just really so meaningful to me. And so I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be I thought I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to go to
Hmm.
art school. And so I did end up going to art school. I went to Rochester Institute of Technology, which is, where I studied design systems and was called communication arts at the time.
Hmm.
So when I left school, I knew I still wanted to illustrate. And moving to New York, I worked for a publishing company, Scholastic, and designed books and illustrated books. And it was like living the dream. And I just really loved the aesthetics of like the characters that were so warm and the stories that just, they slowed things down and made things simple. And I really just love that. So much of design for the kids field is just bad. Like it's bad design. It's busy, it's too colorful, too like bad typography. I really think kids deserve great design. I think give them the respect of knowing the difference. Often, when hiring designers, I like to work with designers who haven't spent their career designing for kids because a good designer does tell stories with efficiency.
Hmm.
They don't need to like throw sprinkles and, they don't need to do a lot of the gimmicks. They bring
Hmm.
smart design to the field, which I really appreciate.
I wanted to jump into your work for Sesame Workshop. I mean, that's the coolest thing ever, first and foremost. I mean, as a child, as an adult who didn't want to be on Sesame Street and work with all those amazing individuals and characters and stories and lessons and it really spoke to me as a child, both when I was in Israel and in the US. Is like I can relate to the way the stories were unfolding and the lessons were given because they were so dimensional. And as a dyslexic, I really felt that a lot of them were so, I can sense the lesson, I can see the letter, I can see the dimensionality of it and understand it from every direction, which we do naturally as dyslexic. But it really spoke to me, Tell me a little bit about the time. Tell me how you got to work for the Sesame Workshop and a little bit about your experience there.
Sure. So, yes, working for Sesame Workshop was a great privilege. I went there from Nickelodeon and I was at Nickelodeon for many years, and that was also different. So fun. Really at Nickelodeon at that time, it was like what was good for kids was good for business. And it was really just about empowering the giggle and just good, clean fun, right? No one is going to get
Hmm.
hurt, but you might get slimed. And then going from there to Sesame, which Both are New York-based companies, which is Sesame is an educational nonprofit. So from the beginning, they have kind of like a halo around them. Not only are they one of the early kids shows that use television to educate, they really are mission driven.
Mm-hmm.
Their goal is to help kids reach their highest potential, which is just like so noble, right? And then they have Muppets. And there is a quote from Jim Henson, who is a creator of the Muppets, that we see with our eyes and we know with our heart. And I feel like that is actually so dyslexic, right? It's just like it's again that combination of we just experience things really deeply. And if we can slow down to have the power of presence, great things are possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so working for Sesame, it was working in the in-house team. Much of my creative career has been building talent in-house. So working with agencies like yours to, create big ideas and then evolving them and living with them in-house. And, we worked on everything from working with the show to working with the consumer products group to create all the consumer products and books and publishing to creating all the educational materials.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that there's different Sesames around the world. You probably know that because you said you grew up in Israel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There's over 30 different Sesame streets where they are locally created, really amplifying the needs of those children.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, in South Africa, there's a Muppet that was created around the time of HIV, early 2000 to grow tolerance and compassion. Because at that time, there was like 1 in 4 children had HIV. So it's like each area adapts to the learning of those needs. And it was just great privilege. It was really a great privilege to work with something so meaningful. And then for me, like the letter of the day and the number of the day, always so creative. I mean, it's the first place we really learned how to play with typography, right?
Mm-hmm.
To personify it, to act it, to use it in space, to play with it. It was amazing.
Amazing.
It was really, really amazing.
Yeah.
So it's a great collection of people with big hearts and huge talent, and it's a special place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. What's some of the things that you would take to consideration as to make sure that the consistency is there? In the US, as you said, over 30 countries with different Sesame Streets for their cultures and end needs. What's some of the key things that you would look for, emphasize in order to make sure that it's on brand?
So, one, we would really spend a lot of time creating graphic systems to make sure that all the characters were well defined. So, their personalities were well defined. Each character has a curriculum that they come with, like Cookie Monster has a curriculum of executive function, which means that you could have a cookie sitting in front of you, but it doesn't mean you eat it all in that moment. You might have to wait. Any kindergarten teacher will tell you that that's like one of the biggest things that they're teaching kids. It's like they don't get to do everything every minute. It's on their mind. So every character has a curriculum and kind of a personality, age, where they live. We would create style guides that would organize their features, their character art, their style, photography, and then also how they translate to 3D toys, and then how they translate to like walk-arounds so that a person can be in them that still look like them, still on character, still on model. So really we would do style guides on how they should animate. So taking those real furry, funny characters and translating them to an animated style that could create games, digital games. And so how they all feel connected was a robust job.
Amazing. I'm so jealous. I mean, it sounds like the best thing ever to be able to sit around with, a great team of creators and artists and storytellers and makers and just sort of come up with these personas and work them out and catalog them, and a dream come true for real. What's your favorite letter?
I don't know if I have a favorite letter.
Hmm.
I mean, I could just take mine. T. I got a lot of T's around.
Oh, you do? Yeah, I have a lot of G's myself. I have hundreds of them,
Yeah.
all sorts of different sizes.
By the way, G is a good one.
It's got a lot of character, doesn't it? It's and I don't know if for you it's the same, but for me, when I see it, when I look at a letter, there's few things that happen. The first thing is that it's a graphic shaped for me. Like I don't necessarily, I see it as a negotiable shape. So I don't see it as like, oh, it's an A and I forget how it looks. I always see like a capital A. I always see the endless amount of points and triangles and the invisible spaces between them and the invisible triangles within the triangles. And then I see it from every perspective. So I can really kind of spin it around. And a G just has so many, especially there's so many different types of styles, right? Font is, I love the shape and the feelings of letters, and how they dance. And the fact that when you design with them, you really can see them not as language. You can see them as these beautiful objects and artifacts that can tell a story on their own, right?
It's so funny. I was just saying, one of the art departments we worked in, I worked at a company called United Media at one point,
Mm-hmm.
and we had redesigned the logo. The art department redesigned the logo. Logo's fine. And then we were doing the letterhead, and it was early days of Mac. And the letterhead was laid out. We had everyone proof it, read it, see it, sign off all the way up the ladder, and then printed, tens of thousands of letterhead. And it was after we realized we spelled United wrong. We had it as Untied Media. We switched the T and the I. And it's just like, how many dyslexics are in the art department? So then we called the art department the rat department, because we're just like switch to letters, because you know what? Who's reading it when you're designing? You're looking at the shapes.
Yeah. And as a dyslexic, I read it, but it's not even on the page. Like
Yeah.
how often, like if I write something, in my email on my signature it says, dictated but not read due to dyslexia, because all the time just dictating things. And sometimes, and my mother-in-law, like if people get back to me, it's like, this is better and funnier than what I
so
know
funny.
You meant, because it's just so, well, English is a second language for me and being non-linear. And so it's like, everything is a metaphor for a metaphor. And, but definitely happened to us where, we misspell very common things in ways that we couldn't see, but that's,
well, the common words that you almost just glaze over, because it's like it's spelling.
Yeah. I rely heavily on Grammarly and on my brilliant writers and strategists in the team to sort of read everything twice. Talking about like seeing things for the first time again. And what do you do in order to sort of stay fresh and look at things you've seen hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times, to see them again as if it's for the first time? Is there anything you do to kind of embrace that part of your dyslexia?
I think what I try to do is stay fully engaged. I mean, it's like, what does that mean? It means that a couple really basic things of health is try to eat healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I started meditation a couple years ago, and I found that is such an amazing way to kind of cleanse the palate. And then you could do this anywhere, but living in New York, I really try to be out and see just life happening. What people are wearing, what they're doing, what art is out, what's opening, what's in the stores. I mean, it's like trying to keep that curiosity. Designing for anyone, but designing for kids. There's always a new 2-year-old. There's always a new 8-year-old.
Yes.
They're on top of it. They're not buried under years of I've seen that, I've done that. It's all new.
I love your Instagram. I mean, your capturing of the photographs of things that you see and the way you capture color and the way you do thematic colors in your feed is absolutely inspiring. I recommend everybody to check it out because it's a great source of beauty and insights.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about, seeing, there's always another 2-year-old or 6-year-olds. What do you do to bring your inner child to the forefront?
So, I mean, as a practice, working at both Nickelodeon and then at Sesame, it's always bringing it through, and really any designer, bringing it through the lens, thinking of life through the lens of your audience. So at Sesame, it's like young kids. I mean, that is a young show. Really keeping things simple. So how do you do that? I mean, for me, it is kind of simple. I think it is my dyslexia that helps me just really distill things down. It's almost like a natural filter inside. One of the things that people have always told me is I'm really good at, like, when people are talking and I'm just thinking and I'm like jotting down notes, and I can like simplify like a whole chunk of, a bunch of information into like its most simplest thing pretty simply. It's like, I think it's one of my gifts.
I mean, as you said earlier, writing a book for children or creating content for children, often it's about the simplicity of it, which is, as we know, it's the hardest thing to do, to get to the essence of something and then to design it in a way that has that sort of clarity. When you look at things, do you sense around you, around the world, do you sort of creative direct or creative critique the world around you for its lack of simplicity? Does it drive you mad sometime, or you sort of like can let it go and be like, well, it's not mine. I just,
Oh, well, I mean, you know what? I do enjoy that the world is bigger than just one thing. Yeah. Like, so when you're talking about my Instagram, like, I'm the one I find the simple shot, but like the world is rich. And like, thank goodness, right? Thank
I
goodness.
love that. Yeah.
I'm glad it's not only one thing.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. For sure. Yeah. It used to, like menus used to they still slightly drive me mad, when I go to restaurants and there's some weird spacing and, just like ton of widows and all sorts of weird sort of I'm like, how is it nobody? And then the food is phenomenal and superb and so detail oriented. The plates are beautifully placed, but they couldn't see that sort of little grain of spice, like just misplaced. It's like it jumps at me and sort of, but I've learned, to your point, to sort of embrace it and love it too, right? Like,
it is interesting when there's a whole curated experience and then there's like something like that missing.
Right.
The world isn't curated. When it's a restaurant, you just think like, oh my God, so much thought there. And then how could they have a widow?
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's obsessive. But, I think that's part of it's probably part of just general design, but I'll speak from my lens. I mean, it's part of the dyslexia mind is that I've learned that I'm so stimulated all the time that I needed to find a way to regulate it. Not because I wanted not to be dyslexic or to stop that, but I wanted to be able to be content in this very rich lens of my dyslexia. So like you, meditating, taking a walk, looking for the simpler things, it's these habits that really allows me to sort of decide, okay, I want my dyslexia to go to 11 right now because I'm trying to do something with that. And then in some situations, I'm like, you know what, maybe I should bring it to 3 and make some room for quietness or empty so I can refill again, What's some of your practices around the meditation that you mentioned?
So I had learned a meditation called Vedic meditation, and it's based on TM. And that just allows the mind to quiet and kind of refresh. I think it's really interesting.
Would you tell us a little bit about the approach for folks that don't really know about it?
Yeah, sure. So it's a mantra-based meditation, and it encourages 2 times a day for 20 minutes. And it is known to kind of like, again, like refresh the brain, reset it,
Mhm.
And what I think it helps is help not react to things, like to leave space around things so that you can actually have a power of presence.
Mhm.
And I think that's interesting because I think we live in a very distracted world.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it also helps as a designer to notice what you're noticing, which sounds basic, but it is like kind of hard to be simple, right? With all the clutter and all the needs and all the pressures in our business.
Yeah, it's helped me tremendously with my dyslexia. It's a great tool for everybody out there. I want to talk a little bit about Parsons School of Design. You've been teaching and lecturing there. Tell us a little about what are you teaching? What are you lecturing? How is it going?
So I was teaching in the school, Parsons School of Design Strategy,
Okay.
and I'm new to that. And I have been very impressed with the students and with the school itself, how it's structured expectations and given support for Parsons. And the students, I think it's interesting based on what I think designers are going to need in the future is to really understand business and strategy and really understand the intersection of design, marketing, and how creative fits into that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think when I went to school, design was much more, it was always responding to business needs, but these students are getting quite a strong foundation of how their skills and talents will fit into that.
Mm-hmm. And what's the type of the curriculum that you lean on in order to teach them those things?
Oh, so what I was teaching is introduction to marketing
Mm-hmm.
and branding.
Mm-hmm.
And it was less of a creative class and it was more of a business class
Mm-hmm.
of how their creative skills fit into these two disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
Branding, best practices, what a brand is. I mean, how organizations create the discipline around the experience of a brand,
Mm-hmm.
and then the marketing strategies and tactics that bring that brand to life in a consistent way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those were things that, I mean, when I went to art school, I studied art.
Yeah, same.
I didn't study, it was then working in the work world that I got an exposure to those things. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think it's really interesting to have that in school.
Yeah, especially when you go commercially to any of the creative fields commercially, you have to know how they work. And
Yeah.
we've learned on the job, really. I mean, I just hustled. I mean, that was my school, just a hustling designer trying to figure it out and
Yeah.
making some great mistakes and learning from them, hopefully. But yeah, that's awesome. And the students that are taking these classes, they come from all different types of creative disciplines.
They do.
Okay.
They do. It's a range of disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
Some are coming from the fashion area,
Mm-hmm.
some are from the graphic
Mm-hmm.
area, product design. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you enjoy it?
I love it.
You love it. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, this fall I really enjoyed the students and I learned from them, which is just the best of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. What can we do to serve young folks in an educational system in a better way?
Ah!
Okay, I'll take
I
that.
talk about this a lot. I actually talk about this a lot because I just think it's such interesting times why the tools have gotten better, and how technology has made it easier to get information. I don't know. I just think, first of all, I had compassion for the students because I felt like, I mean, I use my phone a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like they were unable to not touch their phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought that was like really they're not able to sustain engagement without touching their phone, which I was like, whoa. And then yeah, I mean, college was very interactive when I went. We sat together, we did our work together, late nights in the studio together. Now everyone's really on their solo path.
Mm-hmm.
We can sit right next to someone and not be like, hey, did you read that book? I didn't know you saw that. Like it seems to be very little like cross curiosity, the thing that's right next door to you, which I feel like is such a loss. I mean, there's other games, but I just like, I think I was telling you I was learning, I have been training to become a reading tutor. And through an organization called the Children's Dyslexia Center. And it's a nonprofit that teaches people who want to become tutors for dyslexic kids, the Orton Gillingham method of reading. And then for kids, it gives them free tutoring. So that's significant to, I mean, New York City, there's very few resources and it's very expensive. So to have free specialized reading tutors is quite something. And it's at the Children's Dyslexia Center. But it's hard. Learning to read is hard. Learning to tutor is really hard.
I love that you're doing it. I love that you're obviously a dyslexic that teaching children with dyslexia to read.
Oh my gosh, I just feel like I could commiserate with them. I'm like, that makes no sense. I really have to restrain myself.
Oh yeah, you can expose the exceptions to the rules.
Yeah, I shouldn't commiserate too much.
Right.
But it does make me want to put this out to anyone you know. I want to redesign materials for readers because back to the kids stuff, it's like it's bad enough. It is bad enough being a struggling reader, but you don't have to be visually assaulted with bad design.
I love that idea.
This is unacceptable. Yeah. Should we do it, Gil?
I would love to do it with you.
Do.
You're the perfect person for it too.
Especially if you're like a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
If you're like a 14-year-old on a second grade reading level, which happens all the time, you're looking at this coloring book, A is for Apple. Like, no, that is like indignant. This is an opportunity.
I know it's necessary. It's it's funny you mentioned because reading is designed, I guess, because it's non-negotiable characters that make sentences, and the meaning is within those, those sentences and stories. And I find that, and also dyslexia. I mean, the majority of the dyslexic design world, things that were designed for dyslexic, are just awful. I mean, they're
horrible.
so badly designed, and either it's so leaning on misunderstanding and cliches, but why does it have to be so unenthusiastic or so
That's right.
mundane and kind of, with all the respect, boring? I mean,
yeah, that's why I was so thrilled when I saw what you were doing. What you're doing is really exciting.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm doing, it's selfishly. I'm just like, how can you design something without bringing life to it? What's the point?
What's the point?
Leave it alone if you're not going to make it, sing whatever song you want to sing. And, children are born with the wealth of imagination that for the rest of their life they're trying to go back to, right?
That's right.
And we're teaching them how to be not imaginative because that's the way it's been done. Dyslexics are also, in many ways, have that sort of endless curiosity. Everything is stimulating. I want to know, I want to see, I want to talk, I want to touch it, I want to play with it. But then we're designed for those two worlds. It's almost that, in a way that just sort of makes me want to turn around and run away, But I would love to rethink how to design books for readers that are inspiring. And that would be a great thing to.
Right?
What do you think some of the misunderstanding about dyslexia and reading from your work with the Children Dyslexia Center?
Well, listen, they're outstanding. They are outstanding. And are you familiar with the Orton Gillingham method? Because I had never heard of that before.
Very lightly. Very lightly. I don't know the ins and outs, but I've heard of it, yeah.
It's a very structured way of learning the sounds and the letters. It's very, very, very structured. And I think through their expertise, they know it needs to be that way. I would like to explore, like, layer in like what you're doing, which is I feel like that's fixing something broken, and learning to read, it does need what it needs. It requires what it requires. But I know I just struggled like until like 6th grade or something,
Mm.
really late. It was difficult. Tears were shed.
Oh, yeah.
And no one ever said, this is going to be, this part may be a struggle, but like there's all these other things that you're going to fly, you're going to shine.
Hmm.
There was never any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of it, I think, too, as you were saying, obviously there's certain techniques and methodologies that allows us to sort of learn how to decode letters to words to sentences and be able to fly through them. And my son can read like nobody business. If the book is not really thick, he doesn't even bother, which
Wow.
I'm pretty impressed. And he retains it and he reads it so quickly. And I'm like, well, like, come back a year from now if you want me to get to the back of that book, because that's never going to happen. But I can listen to it auditorily and get the same
Yeah,
content and insight.
that's right.
But I think that part of it is like to understand that it is hard, right? It is hard to learn how to read. It is, you have to sort of suspend all the other things that are happening, all the stimulation, all the feelings that comes from it. You need really to challenge to do so. But yeah.
I wonder how we're going to keep or get people kids motivated to have a productive struggle.
Mm.
And I feel like if I didn't have the mom I had, I don't know if I would have had a productive struggle. I might have just given up with a very tearful struggle. Like, to me, that's also part of the challenges. And I do feel like the work you're doing kind of could like create a nest for that,
So I want to go a little bit to the beginning of your dyslexia journey. How old were you when you diagnosed?
So here's the thing. All right. I was a struggling reader, and it seemed like every year at the end of the school year, my mom would be like, this may be the year we keep you back. It's just like you're struggling too much, right? Maybe this year we'll keep you back. And then it was end of 5th grade, going into 6th grade. She brought me to a reading specialist who had diagnosed my processing issues. Now, the word dyslexia wasn't used a lot. It was not used a lot back then, like where I grew up. It wasn't a word used a lot, but the solution was a structured reading program and
Mm-hmm.
extra help.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of later that the word dyslexia, like I didn't hear that word used a lot for a lot of years.
Hmm.
It was more just like I was living it.
Right.
Like
Right.
spelling.
Mm-hmm.
Spelling's a nightmare.
Right. Yeah. I kind of relate to that as well. I think that just people just didn't know. I don't think that
They didn't know, right?
I don't think that they knew and they were like not using the word. I think that just it wasn't, even though there was the knowledge out there to a certain degree, only about the learning disability, right? That, oh, you have dyslexia, so you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Nothing
Oh, yeah.
else about the way our mind works and that we see the world through the same
Yeah.
thing with them. But it was definitely, yeah, it was, I haven't learned about it either. So before you were diagnosed, it was struggling. You had a hard time reading and writing. As you said, you collected your tears.
You know what? My writing, I always loved writing though. I always loved like looking at different letters. Like when I saw like a letter I loved that someone had their writing, I would copy it. Like I love the letter forms. That wasn't a struggle for me. And I know it is for some, but I loved writing.
Yeah. Hmm.
But spelling
Spelling
still is
and reading.
tricky. Reading, I'm better at reading. I did learn to read.
Yeah.
I did learn to read. And it really, like, I do feel like in high school, had less struggle. I did less struggle.
Oh, that's cool.
I hated reading out loud.
Do you still do?
As an adult, I've practiced reading out loud.
Oh, you do? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get joy of reading now?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, and I think it's mostly because of my digital habits, I read less books now. I listen to a bunch of stuff. Listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Podcasts, books, articles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After you were diagnosed, what kind of support or resources were available to you at the time?
At the time, it was called My Mom.
Mm,
There was not a lot of extra support in the school.
mhm, mhm,
My mom was a teacher. She was an educator. She wasn't working in the system. She was raising us. So she did have some, and that back then they did teach phonics. Like it was something that it's not like what they've been doing the last several years.
mhm, mhm. Did she read to you out loud, or did she sit with
She
you?
did
And yeah, my mom did the same thing.
both. I had the flashcards in the middle of the table.
Mm,
Had to do my drills and skills before I played,
mm,
before I went out in the yard, before I drew.
mm,
Got to do drills and skills.
mhm. Yeah, I remember we used to make. My mom is a sculptress, so we have clay and stones.
Creative family.
Yeah, like my grandmother's was a painter and pianist, and my great grandmother was a painter. But my mom used to have clay in her studio, so I would make some of the letters out of clay. And that was a very, I think now it's actually a methodology that people use. At the time, it was more like just, but making the letter out of clay allowed me to really kind of, and only in retrospect I see it now, allowed me to really kind of embrace the way I saw in my dyslexia, because I can
Yeah.
feel it and I can see it and I can shape it. So I was using all my creative senses.
The multisensory learning.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So and that was a really cool thing. And at the time I was like, okay, here's the word, and I would make it. And it did help a lot. It did help a lot. When did it click for you that dyslexia was a positive rather than a negative?
Oh, I'm going to say very late in life, like just recently.
Really?
Recently. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just recently. Like hearing you, like I've never considered my strengths to be part of dyslexia.
Hmm.
So I feel like that the campaign that you're running, what you're doing is like it gets better campaign. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like it
Hmm.
gets better. Do you remember that campaign?
Yeah.
So it's like I don't feel like people talked about this before. I don't feel like this was conversations that were people were. I don't remember being in art school saying, how many people are dyslexic? Like, I don't remember anyone talking about it. I feel like now it's part of a conversation. Now we're seeing how high the numbers are, how common it is, how it was just integrated into LinkedIn as one of the skills that are going to be needed for the future of workplace. That wasn't conversations we were having back in the day, or I wasn't a part of those. If they were had, I was not part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like I am a late bloomer in
Hmm.
this regard to really understand, like, oh, these things that come easily to me, it's because of that.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So cool.
So you're really making a difference.
And I think we've talked a little bit about it today in different ways, but I want to ask you about, like, how do you dance with your dyslexia? What are the things you do that sort of feeds that creativity, that desire, that dyslexia brain for you? Is there something specifically that comes to mind?
So I'm in a phase of reinvention.
Mm,
So I've spent all this time in kids media. Love it. I think I love design. I love making things. I love working with creative people. I love using design and using leadership to help people reach their highest potential. Like working at Sesame, where it was like helping kids meet their highest potential, teaching, even if it's one-on-one, helping either designers of the future or readers of, like, I really am inspired by like shining a light on people's gifts
mm,
that they may not be in touch with. And I really, again, looking at these moments of, I feel we're in a time of churn and transformation. And while that's stressful, I feel that's a hopeful time because we're all going to be forced to live and learn and stay flexible and adapt.
mhm.
And I think part of my design, maybe part of my dyslexia, is I'm a good connector in that way. I'm good at finding connections that kind of raise the level, kind of raise everyone to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm exploring what that means.
I'm so thankful for you to give us so much of your time and your honesty, and you're so inspiring. And I'm just delighted that you came on the podcast and sat with me today and let our audience sort of hear about how you embrace and dance with your dyslexia. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Gil. I'm really inspired by you.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise, it takes one to know one, right? We kind of, every time I meet another dyslexic, I'm like, oh, another lost brother and sister, because it's like we have so many similarities, and we think in so many similar ways, even if it's in different industry. We just still want like, oh, I totally get you. I totally get the way your brain fires. I totally get your passion and inspiration. And when you talk about things, I can totally see it. I can totally start to imagine how it's going to manifest into actions. And so it's been terrific. Thank you.
If you enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe to this series wherever you get your podcasts. Visit DyslexicDesignThinking.com to learn more about our latest initiatives, including Dear Dyslexia, the postcard project, or to book Gil to speak at your next event or conference. Stay connected on Instagram at Dyslexic Design Thinking, or drop us a line at dyslexia@gershoni.com to receive our monthly newsletter and learn about our upcoming programming. Dyslexic Design Thinking is produced by Gershoni Creative. Learn more at gershoni.com. Until next time, be well.